Hey guys, it's Miss Sims. So I was going to do a quick notes thing for the Great Depression. So let's go ahead and get this started. So yeah, move this around. All right. So first thing I'd like for you guys to look at is this picture. The background of this is a mural, and that's going to be like a big painting that's done on a wall or like a billboard type thing that's put up. And it said, "The world's highest standard of living." And then it shows this happy family in a car. And they're all dressed very nice. Even their dog looks happy. It says, "There's no way like the American way." And then in front of that, you're going to notice the people that are standing in front of that, they're actually waiting in what's going to become known as a bread line or a soup line. So these are people who are waiting to be fed because they have no way of feeding themselves. Okay, so we're going to see that there's going to be a really big transition for most of America from this time of prosperity in the 1920s, moving to what's going to be known as the Great Depression, which is going to be a very difficult decade for most Americans. Okay. All right, so these are some of the images that you're going to see. Pictures are going to become very, very prominent during this time period as a way of documenting. This is going to be one of the most famous pictures from this time period. It's called Migrant Women. So the photographer, not this lady, but the photographer's name is Deborah Lang, and you guys are going to actually see a video about her. It's a few minutes long, I believe tomorrow or the next day. She took a picture of this woman, and their family moved around from space to space, and these are her children. And she had actually, her backstory is that she had actually had to sell some of her children just to feed them. Okay, we're going to see just a lot of people that are living in extreme poverty. So this is not just a few people. This is a lot of people are going to really be struggling. And this is another one of those bread lines that we're going to see people waiting in. This is another one that we see the children for sale. I'll see if I can back up just a little bit on this one so you can see more of it. So it says, "For children for sale, inquire within." And so this is a woman, she's hiding her face because she's ashamed, but she's not able to feed her children. And so I believe the backstory on this is she was hoping that someone would take two of the children and feed them and give enough money to be able to feed two of the other children. So this is really, really difficult times for a lot of people. Okay. So let's talk about what an economic depression is to start with. So it's this really rough cycle. And I'm going to explain some of this stuff. I know that economics is hard for a lot of people just because it doesn't feel very concrete. So don't stress if you don't completely understand this. Just try to get as much as you can. So what this process is where the consumer, which is the person that's buying the product, they don't have a lot of confidence that either the product is good, which is not the case here. In this case, they don't have a lot of confidence that they're going to be able to buy more things, okay? And so they stop demanding. It says there's a low demand for goods, which means that they stop wanting to buy stuff. And as a result of them not buying stuff, then you get to this right here. So if people aren't buying stuff, what's going to happen is people are going to have to put stuff on sale, okay? When they put stuff on sale, that means that the company that made it is not going to make a lot of money, which means that they're going to have to lay off or cut hours, different things like that, of the people that work for them. Well, now the people who work for them or used to work for them, now they don't have a job, so they don't have a lot of money. And so we're at this point lower income. So because they don't have any money, they are not able to buy things as well. And so as a result, we kind of come back up to the top. These people have been laid off. They don't have any money to buy things. And so they're not buying stuff. Prices are cut even lower. As a result, people are having to lay off their employees, more unemployment, which means fewer people are able to buy stuff. It just creates this really negative, really bad cycle, which is going to lead to an economic depression. Okay. So the causes of this depression, we talked about in the 1920s that there was this idea, this illusion of prosperity. So there was what was called easy credit, meaning if you didn't have enough money to buy what you wanted to, it was okay. You could buy it on credit or use an installment plan, meaning that you pay a little bit every month, and so you don't have to have all the money up front. You don't have to have cash, okay? And so what this did is it created this unnatural demand for goods or for items, okay? And so eventually those companies kept producing them, so now there is going to end up being more stuff than people are able to buy, because eventually you're going to run out of credit. You can't continue to buy things on credit forever, okay? So whenever that credit runs out, that's when we're going to see a problem happen. Okay. Also, the farmers have a lot of debt. And so we mentioned this, you saw this a little bit whenever you learned about the Dust Bowl. This is when that is kind of happening. So it kind of happened a little bit earlier. It's a long spread event. But during the war, there was an overproduction of crops, because remember, we were supplying a lot of crops for people in Europe who were fighting, and so they couldn't farm. Once the war ends, we're not going to be selling our crops in Europe. And so as a result, people are going to face foreclosure, they're going to lose property, they're going to lose their farms. And so there's a lot of people that are going to be struggling, particularly in the Midwest and also in the South. Okay. All right, another problem, industrial overproduction. So what this means is that factories were also producing a lot of stuff because of the war effort. Well, after the war is over, we're doing this thing of isolationism. So as a result, we are not trading with other countries. And so as a result, we're not selling our stuff everywhere. Okay. And so this is going to cause those factories that have been producing tons and tons and tons, it's going to put them in a bad situation, and they're eventually going to have to start laying off some workers. So what you're going to see is there's lots of different things that are kind of leading to this depression, and all of them happening together is what makes it particularly difficult. Okay. There's also going to be, it's called a maldistribution of wealth. Okay, if you are in Spanish, you know that the word mal means bad. Okay, if you're not in Spanish, the word mal means bad. Okay, so this means bad distribution of wealth. Basically, 5% of the wealth is controlled, 5% of the people control 33% of the wealth, which means that there are people that are extremely, extremely wealthy, and then there are people that are not very wealthy, okay? And we talked a little bit about this whenever we talked about how the other half lives, when we talked about progressivism, but it's really hitting the fan at this point. This idea that trickle down this trickle down theory, which was basically that companies should be able to do whatever they want, and as a result, they're going to gain a lot of money, and it will slowly trickle down to their workers. Their workers are going to buy stuff, and then it's going to trickle down to all parts of society. The conclusion was at this point, hey, that's not working. Okay, the rich are becoming richer, and the poor are becoming poorer, and this is causing a problem. All right, I believe this is the last. No, okay, got a couple more. The stock market problems. Okay, so people are doing what's called wild speculation, which means that they're buying on margin. What that means is people are going and they're getting loans, and then they are buying stocks, hoping that those stocks will go up, and then they can sell it, they can pay back their loan, and then they'll have just made money by doing nothing. Okay, the problem is the stock market's going to crash. So on October 29th, 1929, Black Tuesday happens. The stock market crashes. People start selling all of their stocks at one time. Nobody wants to buy it. And as a result, the prices of the stocks are going to plummet, which means that all of these people that bought on speculation, meaning that they borrowed money from the bank so that they could buy stock, now have no way to pay the bank back. Okay, and it's not like a car, whereas if I borrow money for a car, if I'm not able to pay that back, I can sell my car and at least pay back some of that money. There's no product that these people can sell. Okay, so this is going to cause the banks to want to call in loans. Okay, following that with the banks. The next problem is the banking system was unregulated at this time. So today, as a result of the Great Depression, banks have to have like insurance on their money, and the federal government or the big government is going to protect that. And the way a bank normally works, like today, if I go and I put $1,000 in the bank, that money doesn't just sit in the bank. What they do is they take my $1,000 and someone else's $1,000 and someone else's $1,000, and they loan it to someone else. And when someone else pays it back, they have to pay back interest. And so some of that interest goes to me. I'll get interest on my money if I leave it in the bank, and some of that goes to the bank, and that's how a bank makes money. Okay, the problem is if everyone pulls their money out at one time, there's not enough money. Okay, so that's why banks don't want you to do what's called a bank run. Okay, which means that everyone kind of comes in at one time. So what's going to end up happening is banks are going to completely collapse. Okay, we're going to see 11,000 banks that are going to close, and all of the people who had their whole life savings in those banks, it's gone overnight, and they're not going to get it back. Okay, can you imagine for a second that you've saved your entire life? Maybe you have $10,000 in there. You've saved your entire life for bad happening, and now something bad has happened, and you're ready to go get your money out because you've been responsible and you've saved it, and your bank is closed, which means it's never going to open back, and you're never going to get your money back. So you are now in a terrible situation, and this is happening all over the country. Remember, all of these problems that we've talked about are kind of piling up. The stock market has crashed. Banks are closing. People are losing their jobs because people are not buying stuff. It's just a lot of bad things are happening over and over and over again. Okay, and then I believe this is the last one. Yes, last one. Government inaction. The government believed that it should not step in to help, especially when the banks close and the stock market closed. Okay, so it's called laissez-faire, and we've talked about this. This is a French term that means just kind of let it be. So the idea is that the system will recover on its own. The government should not step in. Okay, this is not what our government does today. So if you guys have heard about, and I'll zoom out so you can see my face. So if you guys have heard about recently, the government has just passed what's called a stimulus package, and basically people that make under a certain amount of money today, 2020, they are going to give people money to help them while the economy is shut down for the pandemic. Okay, so that is the government doing something about it. Okay, and the government eventually will have to pay that back through taxes and things like that. But the idea is it'll help us not go into a very terrible economic crisis. They didn't believe that at this point. Okay, at this point, they believe the system will recover on its own. And the problem is that there's so many people that are going to be struggling during the Great Depression. There isn't enough people to be able to help. Okay, all right, we're going to go back to this. Okay, so there are two presidents during the Great Depression. The first one is Herbert Hoover, and then the second one is Franklin Delano Roosevelt. Okay, so we already had a Roosevelt. We'll talk about him in a little bit. This is his cousin or nephew, I believe. Okay, so first, let's start with Herbert Hoover. Okay, he starts off as being very popular, but by the end of it, everyone hates him. Okay, and that's not really fair, but we'll kind of look at that. Okay, so Herbert Hoover, let's start with the election. All right, so he's elected in 1928. He's the boy wonder. Everyone loves him. The economy is great in 1928. He's popular with both parties. His biggest weakness is just really crappy timing. 1 year later, the economy is going to plummet. And that's not necessarily his fault, but his reaction to the plummet of the economy is going to be a major problem. Okay? All right. So he has this idea, and it's called rugged individualism, which basically means that people should take care of themselves, okay? And this is the conservative traditional approach. This is what everyone believes at the time. So he's very optimistic. He says that the economy will recover naturally, and the government should just not get involved. The industry, so the factories, the business owners, they know best how to fix this. And so if we just as the government stay out of it, it will fix itself. Well, that didn't work. Okay. He kind of preached this, like I said, called rugged individualism, that people should help themselves. You have to keep in mind when people are struggling really, really, really hard and they want to work, but they're not able to work because there are no jobs. If you say you need to help yourself, people are going to get really mad, and that's what's going to end up happening. So Hoover did not believe that the government should give relief to people. He said that people need to make sacrifices, and he wasn't just hard-hearted. He wasn't just saying do this. He actually cut his own salary by 20%, and he's going to urge state and local governments to provide relief. So he doesn't believe that people shouldn't get any help. He just believes that that should be done at the state and the local governments. The problem is the depression is he believed it was a local problem. It wasn't a local problem. It was happening all over the United States, and people are really, really, really going to struggle. Okay, and if you look at this. This chart down here, this is the rate of unemployment. So whenever Hoover becomes president, there is less than 3% of the people that are unemployed. By the end of his presidency, we're looking at almost 1 in 4 people being unemployed. And that's going to be extremely difficult, especially during these years when many families only had one income earner. So both parents weren't working always. And so that's going to be very difficult. Okay. Again, this rugged individualism, he believed that the federal government should keep a balanced budget, should not go into spending, and as a result, this is going to result in terrible public relations. So people started setting up little shanty towns, which are just like shacks, because they were kicked out of their apartments because they couldn't pay their rent. They lost their houses because the banks went under. And so people start setting up shacks in Central Park and in New York and in other areas. And people started calling those Hoovervilles. Okay. You guys have probably heard about the Hoovervilles because the 8th grade used to build them. And we were planning on doing that this year. Unfortunately, I'm guessing that's not going to happen because we're not at school. But you guys see, these are just like kind of makeshift shacks that families are living in. There's no electricity. There's no running water. It's a really rough time, and people are going to call these Hoovervilles after President Hoover. So as you can see, people do not think a whole lot of him at this point. Okay. So by 1929, the Federal Farm Board are going to try to figure out how to help the market as far as farming. And so their idea was, let's withhold crops from the market until prices are going to rise. The problem is people are starving, and then your solution is, hey, don't plant anything and just suck it up for a little bit, and then maybe next year things will be better. People are starving right now, so they don't really want to do that. So that's going to not go super well. Okay, another thing that they're trying to do to get the economy going is they're going to cut federal income tax, okay? And this doesn't really make a whole lot of difference because basically most families are going to save somewhere around $3 to $4 a year. And $3 to $4 was worth a little bit more during the 1930s than it is today. But think of that like 20 bucks, okay? So if you're really struggling, 20 bucks doesn't really help over a whole year. Okay. And then there's also going to be this tariff that's signed in. Just skip that on your notes. You don't have to worry about learning about that. Okay, and then we're going to get what's called the Reconstruction Finance Corporation, and basically what it's going to do is it's going to grant loans to big businesses, and the idea is that if these big businesses can get loans and they can get back up on their feet, and they're going to be able to hire people. If people get hired, then they're going to be able to buy stuff, and everything will be better. The problem is it's too late. Okay, by this time period, there are 12 million people that are unemployed. To give you guys an idea, whenever about a year into this crisis, 2 million people were unemployed. So 12 million, that's really, really, really bad. Okay. So it's kind of too late for this to work. All right. Also, we're going to see some World War One vets that are not getting any of the things that they were promised. So they're not getting like pensions, they're not getting access to health care. And these are World War One vets that risk their lives. And so they're going to march on the White House, and Hoover is going to end up hiding in the White House and doesn't deal with it. And as a result, there's no way that Hoover is going to get elected next time. Okay, so election comes up 1932. He runs against FDR, Franklin Delano Roosevelt, and Franklin is going to win in a landslide. And Herbert Hoover, as he leaves office, is going to be booed. He is going to be kind of the comeback kid, though. He's going to serve in a lot of different volunteer positions within the government and eventually takes over the FBI. And just has a very good career after he leaves the presidency until he died at 90 years old. Okay, so Hoover is going to get all of the blame for the Depression, and that's probably not fair. The biggest problem is he doesn't do anything to help until it's too late. So that is kind of where we are with that. Okay. Fact, Hoover did more than any president before him had done helping the president. What you guys have to keep in mind is that the common theory was that the system will correct itself because they had never had an economic depression that was this bad. Now we have learned from that, and so that is why the government does things to prevent huge economic crises like this. Okay. All right, so the next set of notes we'll take will deal with our second president, FDR, and that's where we're going to hang out. That will finish the Depression, and he will almost finish World War II. He's going to die right before World War II is over, but that is how that's how far we're going to get with him. He is president for 4 terms. So, anyways, very interesting.